Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney, that's Nick Zararis, and Nick, we have a lot of trade deadline stuff to get into, but also the Rangers had a prime time ticket to get 4 points from two of their biggest standings rivals this weekend and only came out with one.
The Rangers are who we thought they were. For the better part of the last month, it's been they hang around in some of these games, and those are the fun ones. You know, going to overtime against Washington last week, you felt reasonably good coming out of that, going into the deadline. Like, okay, they're going to hang around. They're probably not going to win enough games consecutively to really push for a playoff spot, but they're going to stay in the conversation. They're going to make this relatively interesting down the stretch. And then you have Friday where they don't do a whole lot. The Sushi trade happens Thursday into Friday. They do an AHL trade on Friday. And you go into the weekend saying you need to win at least one of these two games. You need to win at least one of these two games. These are the teams you are in direct competition with to go to the playoffs. These are two teams that do not have significant track records of winning big games. These are two franchises some would venture to say are hexed or cursed. You know, the Blue Jackets have one series win in their franchise's history. Actually, no, two. Excuse me. They have two series wins in their franchise's history if you want to include the 2020 bubble series against Toronto. And then if you venture further, Ottawa, come on. This is one of the most cursed franchises in the entire sport. And the Rangers, through very weird lineup decisions, through the simple matter of the fact they are not a well-structured team, were systemically disabled over the course of 6 periods. And Laviolette said it. You have a multi-goal lead with 10 minutes to go and you lose that game. That's something that you don't get over. You know, that's the sign of a bad team. You know how we spent all of last year saying, well, they're a good team. They keep finding ways to win. Good teams find ways to win games. Bad teams find ways to lose games. Yep. The Rangers are a bad hockey team. And Saturday was proof. And then Sunday was just a little bit more reinforcement. If you were a little ambiguous, like, hey, they got an overtime. They got a loser point. And then Sunday, Columbus came into your building and Adam Fantilli was the best player on the ice for either team. And I like Adam Fantilli, but he's not the best player in that game on either team.
Yeah, and, you know, Saturday was rough for a lot of reasons, right? You know, you take a 3-1 lead. Also, by the way, it should have been like 7. It should have resembled the score from yesterday. Like, yeah. Ottawa should have scored like 7 goals. Shesterkin was outstanding. And the funniest, I love Twitter so much sometimes. I got a tweet, you know, because I tweeted that K'Andre Miller was having a great game defensively. And then, of course, he has to put, you know, not the greatest. He put, you know, food on my face after giving up what was the game winner because of that awful pass on the defensive end. Leads to a grade A scoring chance, and that goes in the net, and the Rangers lose. And I got a tweet after that saying, oh, well, you know, if Shesterkin would have made that save. It's like, my dog, are we in the same universe right now? Shesterkin's the only reason they made it to the overtime. Like, I understand they gave up 2 goals late in that game, neither of which are particularly on Shesterkin to begin with. But, like, even if you want to argue the first one was on Shesterkin, yeah, it was tipped in like kind of a weird angle. And, like, you can see it was weird because of the way he reacted to it, because he was on his game the entire way. It was a strange play, and it, you know, it went in. Would you like him to make it that save? Yeah, like, sure. But, you know, the game was not on Shesterkin's fault. The fact that somebody, like, their biggest takeaway from that experience was that game was on Shesterkin is absolutely baffling to me. And then you go into, you know, the game against Columbus, and it was, you know, Jonathan Quick was kind of swimming in net for a lot of those goals.
And that's kind of the conundrum there.
Yeah, he, like, listen, I love Jonathan Quick, the individual, and he's done some really good things for the Rangers in net when he's been on. Yesterday was not a game that he was on for. I mean, my man's was swimming in net for a lot of those saves, for a lot of those opportunities, for a lot of those shots. I mean, like, you know, he would make one save, and then if there was any form of a rebound, he would be way out of position to even, you know, even attempt at making the second save. Like, he was not having a great night. But the Rangers just didn't show up for him either. Like, you know, some of it was on Quick, sure, but a lot of it was the absolute lack of defensive structure at all in front of their goaltender. There was nothing. Like, Vakanainen left somebody out in front a couple of times, and that led to a goal or a great scoring opportunity, whether that be Susie, whether that be Miller, whether that be somebody else. There was no help in front of your
They
goaltender.
were outscored
Brother,
7-1 at
it's
5-on-5.
March. It's
7-1.
March. How are we talking about lack of defensive structure? It's March, dog. It's past the deadline. What are we doing? This is playoffs. We're talking about playoffs. It's come on.
And that was kind of how I've been looking at the last month or so of, yeah, it's nice. It's a nice story. They're hanging around. The JT Miller thing is fun. The young guys, like we said last week, you had the combination of the veterans that feel like they're being a little disrespected and being written off, and the collection of young guys, whether you talk about Berard, Othman, Rempe, Parsonen, etc., Zach Jones, as like, we got to prove it. We got to prove we belong at the NHL level. And instead, again, the Stars weren't good enough. They are desperately missing Adam Fox. They cannot string together a good period of defense. I mean, over the weekends, over the course of 2 games, they were outscored 10-4 at 5-on-5. They were out high danger chanced by 10 between the 2 games, and they had an 809 save percentage at 5-on-5 across 2 games. That's you're not going to win professional hockey games with 809 goaltending and that level of defense. And
when your best part of your game is the penalty kill, what are we doing here?
Yeah,
the power. Like I want to tweet this out yesterday. I ended up not doing it, but like, how are the Rangers at 5-on-5 looking at like 5 beer league players, and then we get to the penalty kill, they're like 4 Wayne Gretzky's? How is that possible?
Okay,
how is that possible?
So I can actually give you a reason for that. And I was talking about someone with this. I was talking about someone about this exact thing this morning. It's because the Rangers are not a structured team. The Rangers fundamentally exist in a plane where they need their star players to make plays outside of structure. And on the penalty kill, where it's just skate as fast as you can in a straight line and break the other way, and there's not as much thinking and it's a lot more instinctive and reactive, that's where your star players are going to shine. We've spent a lot of the last year and a half and change or so talking about the difference between this year and last year, where last year, that first 20, 30 games where they came out of the gate like 19-4, they were playing really structured, sound hockey, quick breakouts, easy link up play. Whereas this year and 2 years ago, the year they lost in the first round to the Devils, it's been very disjointed. It's been get the puck up to Panarin, wait for him to make a play. Get the puck up to Zibanejad, wait for him to make a play. Get the puck up to JT Miller, wait for him to make a play. On the penalty kill, you can do that because it's a lot more instinctive and reactive, and generally speaking, you're going to catch a numbers advantage in that situation. And that's where the Rangers create the best, is when they have the rush opportunities and when they catch teams in odd man rushes. You know, when you catch Columbus bringing that extra guy down and it's one guy up high, all they got to do is get that puck past that wave of 3 guys where it's the one defender at the point. You get it to a 2-on-1. The Rangers are good at those. And look, Kreider and Zibanejad really tried to mess that up on the breakaway where they passed it back and forth to each other 4 times in 10 feet. They did score, thankfully, unlike Trocheck when he had the 3-on-0 and he just didn't shoot the puck.
Of course, the innate fear within me, and I would assume you, is like, oh, please just get a shot on goal. Please don't overpass. Please just do something with this. And they did. To their credit, they did score. But oh my God, there's way more pressure on that situation than there needed to be because of the Rangers' love for overpassing.
And this is Columbus we're talking about here, who doesn't have great goaltending. You know, you scored 1 5-on-5 goal in a game against Columbus's backup because Elvis didn't start. And just, you're sitting here, and I think we're starting to like break the dam of common sense. I think people are really starting to realize that the JT Miller thing was a nice idea, and it very well might help next season.
And he made the team better, for sure.
He's undoubtedly made the team better. They didn't give up a lot as far as big picture assets. You know, you worry a little bit about where that draft pick ends up sliding to in terms of giving it to Pittsburgh, but it was a nice idea. It made the team better. They still need so much more.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be your big takeaway after this weekend, is that for all of the attempted moves they've made, they still don't have 6 defensemen you feel good about. They have maybe 2.5, depending on who's in on that given night. And that's the biggest thing. Like, can we gripe about Trocheck and Lafreniere and Panarin and Zibanejad and Kreider and like
Kreider look good. Yes,
Kreider actually did. He was moving well.
My man's was skating really, like he was one of the more noticeable forwards in that game. It was him and Matt Rempe, which again, like,
not a great omen.
Matt Rempe cannot be your best skater.
No.
He can't be. And also, like, you know, and people were mentioning it on social media as well, Matt Rempe was skating into corners without his elbow out. Like he's learning from his past mistakes, which is good, which is what we want. He was active on the forecheck. He was making space. Like Matt Rempe was one of the best players on the Rangers last night, which can't happen because Matt Rempe is your 12th forward. Your 12th forward cannot be your best player. Like in essentially what is a game 7 game. Like that game for it's a little bit of a hyperbole, but that game dictated a lot about the next 20 or so or however many games that they have. That was your game 7. And your 12th forward was one of if not the best skater for your team last night. That's an indication that, hey, you don't have it. That's not acceptable. That can't happen.
Again, I don't want to hear about how the captain is Trocheck. I don't want to hear about how the captain is on this team. They're not. If you had a leader, and don't tell me it's JT Miller, don't tell me JT Miller's making them tougher, harder to play against. Don't tell me that JT Miller is the type of guy who's going to lead them out of the abyss, because he's been here a month now. The defensive effort, top to bottom, still stinks. And defense
is trying, though. So you know what? Maybe if nothing else, JT Miller
he's giving them offense.
Has gotten
He's at least Zibanejad's giving them offense. He's still bad defensively, but he is giving them offense, which is more than they were doing. But again, this is a team that has 1.5 functional defensemen right now. They are not playing their 6 best defensemen. I am certainly sure that Zach Jones is going to end up wearing the scarlet letter for the effort over the weekend, and DeHaan will draw back in, even though Jones probably has a more versatile, useful skill set for what the Rangers actually need. And you're just left sitting here thinking, well, if they're not making the playoffs, what's there to accomplish over the final 18, 19 games, whatever it is they have remaining? And I think undoubtedly the single biggest thing is figuring out who's going to be on the team next year. And I think for all intents and purposes, Chris Drury's already decided who he wants on the team for next year now. And it's simply a matter of if he can get rid of the guys he doesn't want to have. And I know we can pivot to talking about the trade deadline here now. I know going into Friday, when you popped in the stream on Friday, we went back and forth a little bit, and just with the way the prices were going, it felt kind of like obligatory to like see what you could do to try and get something for Chris Kreider, because in the market that was out there, like Marchand only got a conditional second. That felt a little light, but
he's 37.
Yeah,
so that makes a little bit more sense. Also, this was like 5 years ago, obviously he would have went for a lot more. So I get it from the Bruins perspective, especially if you're a fan of like you only got a second for Brad Marchand. He's 37. Like as slight as that price may be, especially given some of the prices for other players, like maybe Florida could have gotten more, maybe Sweeney could have twisted his arm, twisted Zito's arm a little bit more. 37-year-olds don't usually attract prices bigger than that.
But I think my bigger takeaway and my larger question mark is, why are they still trying to do 1 foot in, 1 foot out? Because that's the first. And if you want to tell me, well, in the summer, they'll have more candidates. They'll have more places they can trade Kreider to and Zibanejad to. And I know more than one person's reported that Zibanejad would purportedly be willing to go somewhere in the summer if the fit was right and he felt okay about it. But this should be your runway. When you have a down year, you want to start making progress on the next season right away. These final 17, 18 games should not be Peter Laviolette trying to save his job and running the most high.
But it will be.
That's the thing. It's going to be the most high floor, low ceiling effort you're ever going to see from a coach over the next 3.5 weeks, because Laviolette's going to want to try and save his job. And he's going to make decisions like playing Susie over DeHaan or Zach Jones based on that. And I do want to talk about whether or not the GM and the coach actually talk to each other when they assemble the lineup or not, because it doesn't seem like it based on the way pieces fit together. But just coming out of the deadline, my biggest takeaway, especially after the weekend, now that we got 2 more games of evidence, you need to get the ball rolling on next year. And that could have started with trading Kreider on Friday. That could start with firing Peter Laviolette and trying to get a replacement in here, or seeing what Michael Pekka can do for 3.5 weeks as on an interim basis. Because if you wait till the summer, like the Rangers love to do, and say, all right, we're going to fire Laviolette the first day of the offseason once we don't make the playoffs. Okay. You're going to sit around until the teams with playoff coaches get fired to see if you can get one of them in here. We're going to relitigate the most uninspiring coaching search of all time 2 years ago that culminated in Peter Laviolette and John Hines, which I think
Yeah.
they interviewed John Hines just to make Laviolette seem better. That was our working theory at the time, and I still think is the case now. And what? We're going to wait to see if the Penguins fire Mike Sullivan for a third year in a row? That's our plan to get better results next year? I mean, this team needs a
And they
massive
might,
overhaul.
because
And
the
they
Penguins are
will.
real bad.
They absolutely. It's not out of the question.
Yeah.
It is not out of the question that the Penguins fire Mike
But
Sullivan.
the question that you have to ask yourself then in that situation is like, yeah, Mike Sullivan's a really good coach, and no one's here to argue that. It's not like he's, one, obviously a perfect coach, and two, that that roster in Pittsburgh is not very good. So how much of that is on Sullivan versus everybody else is up for debate. But also, it's not like Sullivan doesn't make his fair share of questionable roster decisions either.
Yes.
Like I know a fair amount of Pittsburgh people, and there's a lot of frustration surrounding his style of who's playing and who's not, and what the structure is going to be with those people, and why are you sitting this guy? Why are you playing this guy? Like, it's there's never going to be a perfect coach for everybody. I understand that. We have to understand as Rangers fans that as much as we would potentially want Mike Sullivan, it's not as if those frustrations are going to go away. Like,
No.
Susie might still play over Zach Jones. Like,
I can't believe they gave up a draft pick for Carson Soucy. Like, you got DeHaan.
And not only a third round pick, San Jose's third round pick, which is going to be a high 30s pick.
Yeah, it's frustrating because you have candidates here. You have Zach Jones and you have DeHaan, and we were talking about it before we went to air, and I tweeted about it last night after the game. DeHaan, in the minutes he's played, he's only played 40-something minutes. He hasn't played a lot. The Rangers have scored 4 goals. They haven't conceded any with him on the ice at 5-on-5. Soucy, he's been on the ice for a little bit more than DeHaan, and he's been on the ice for 1 goal for and 3 goals against. The high danger chances, it's -6 for Soucy, it's +3 for DeHaan. The numbers are very straightforward. DeHaan, over the course of their respective careers, DeHaan has been a better player. And this season so far, I know it's only 2 games for DeHaan, only 2 games for Soucy. The numbers are better for DeHaan. And you think about, and look, this is as like peak anecdotal evidence as it gets, but the 2 games DeHaan played were shutouts against the Islanders and the Predators. What happened over the weekend with Soucy in the lineup? Again, extremely anecdotal evidence and recency bias, my favorite bias. I just learned about it. But at the same time, if you have straightforward, obvious numbers that tell you this guy is doing this better than this guy, and we're still playing the guy who's worse because we think he's better because he's tall, you're missing me here. Like, DeHaan isn't anything special. He's better than Carson Soucy. He's arguably better than Vakanainen. I think he's probably
not arguably.
I think he is better than Vakanainen.
Yeah, that's not a hot take by you to say that Hamadon's better than Vakanainen. I also am very much over the feigned you're just like analytics are ruining the game type of like.
We're just talking about goals.
I know.
Goals for and against.
Here's the thing. These are, at this point, fairly straightforward statistics. Yeah, they're analytical, I guess. But, like, again, when this player is on the ice, the other team has created less offense and hasn't had any goals. It's a 2-game sample size for DeHaan. I understand that. But, again, like, these are almost surface level stats at this point of stats. Like, yeah, they're not goals, assists, points, and plus minus, the best stat in hockey. But like, these are not, no one's digging in the trenches to find some cherry pick stats. This is, hey, when this player is on the ice, the other team has a much more difficult, path to creating high, good scoring chances. That's it. It's like, this is not rocket science. This is like, we're not, diving deep into the 6th layer of Dante's Inferno to find these stats. This is basic stuff at this point. And if your counter argument is, you guys are stats nerds, and like I'm kind of over it. I'm kind of over that argument, because at a certain point, you are forcibly being left in the dust, and you are being mad about it. These we're not creating formulas to make DeHaan look good. This is basic stuff that if you don't understand or refuse to understand at this point, that's on you. That's not on us.
And it's frustrating because we spent the entirety of the last year and a half saying, well, if they get rid of the dead weight, they'll be a lot better. And the first games they play without Ryan Lindgren, they shut out their opponents in
Yep.
2 straight games. And then they bring in somebody who is of comparable performance to Ryan Lindgren, and they give up 11 goals in 2 games. This is the most straightforward, simple. I struggle to understand the discrepancy here. Like I get that a GM, a coach, they have different priorities. They're going to think about different things. But if you are watching the team over the last week and a half and you purportedly watch the games like you claim to, how is your takeaway from the last week? Well, you guys don't know what you're talking about. The Han stinks. Well, go look at DeHaan's numbers over the last 12 years he's been in the NHL. He's always been a positive player. Just over the last 3 years, the only difference, and I went and pulled the stats for the two of them over the last 3 years. DeHaan has an advantage in chances for, shots for, expected goals for, and high danger chances for. The only difference is that Soucy has a better goals for rate. The question, though, is, and the reason why is that Soucy's got 30% better goaltending, 30.30 higher save percentage in his minutes than DeHaan. And DeHaan's at 48% goals for share. Soucy's at like 53 some odd percent. And a big chunk of that is just better save percentage. DeHaan 894, and then Soucy's like 918, something like that. That's the discrepancy there. That's 3 years of data across two different teams for in Soucy's case from Minnesota and Seattle. 3 years of data, and we have
And
to
Vancouver.
and Vancouver, excuse me, I forgot about that. And you have and you have people saying, well, he kills penalties. Well, does he kill penalties, or did teams put him on the penalty kill? Because again, those are two different things.
Also, you know who kills penalties? Calvin DeHaan.
Yeah, it's really not that hard. Is he good at killing penalties, or is he just on the penalty kill? Is he good on the power play, or is he just on the power play? And
Yeah.
you are watching
like noted power play demon Johnny Brzezinski. Like, he's out there on the power play right now. But would you put him on the power play if you had a better roster around him? No.
That's what I said on Sunday. I when we were at the game last week, was Brodzinski's on the power play, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's right. They have all of their good players on the first power play, and there's nothing left to put on the second one, especially with no Riley Smith, who they traded, and we'll talk about at some point as well. But I think my big problem, and the reason I feel just so wholly apathetic and disinterested in a lot of the conversation around the team, is you look at the guys they have under contract for next year, and you look at the options they have defensively. So they have Fox, Borg, and Schneider down the right side. Those guys are all under contract. Soucy's under contract for next year, and Vakanainen's under contract for next year. Miller and Zach Jones are RFAs after this year. Please tell me how the Rangers are going to have a functional defense next year. That's what I would like to know. And don't tell me Gavrikov, because he extended in LA. Don't tell me it's Jacob Chikrin, because buying in on a 30-year-old coming off of a 14% shooting season. And are we even going to play Jacob Chikrin with Adam Fox, or is he going to have to ride with Will Borgen? It's the most mind-boggling thing in the world, because they're going to try and sell us on this. I'm getting out ahead of this. We're a month early. The season's going to end about a month from now, and assuming they miss the playoffs, it's going to be, well, we're going to overhaul the defense and we're going to make the playoffs next year. You tried doing that in season, and you arguably haven't improved the team at all. You turned Kakko, who's been close to a point per game since going to Seattle, into Borgen, who's at best average. Vakanainen stinks. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
he's not very good. He is not very good. And he can't come out of the lineup for whatever reason. I don't understand why he needed a contract extension right now. That's another thing that I don't get. But they need 3 new defensemen for next year down the left side. Arguably, they need a replacement for one of Schneider or Borgen too. And they're not going to bat 1,000 on replacements. I can promise you, they're not going to bat 1,000 on trying to find guys to fill in the empty spots in this lineup.
They were close to it for about a week.
Yeah.
And then they traded for Soucy for some reason. Yeah, I mean, the blue line is, again, this all goes back to, do the Rangers know what a good defenseman is? Because we keep asking ourselves that. And I think with even more of a data sample than, we had before, I think the answer has to be no. They traded away Ryan Lindgren, and they made the team better. They looked really good defensively
for 2 games.
And then they brought in essentially the same player back. They traded a high third round pick. Again, San Jose's third round pick, which is going to be a 30s pick. That's not a nothing pick that they gave up for Carson Soucy, a guy that is a sort of a Ryan Lindgren type of player, like stats wise and play wise. I mean, he's not anything that's going to make the blue line better. And you're sitting Dahan. I would imagine, the Rangers didn't get much of anything for Zach Jones at this deadline, so they kept him. But I would have to think they're going to move him at this upcoming summer. I just don't know what they're seeing. Like, even if you want to say the Rangers don't care about analytics at all, like zero, and they just watch the games. We're just watching the games, and we can see the problems with Vakanainen, with Borgen, with Soucy already.
Borgen had 5 turnovers in the first 20 minutes of game time, and he played 6 minutes at that point. He turned the puck over almost once per minute in the 6 minutes he played last night before Columbus really started pouring it on. That's the guy who needed a 5-year extension a month into being
after
on the team.
After a 15-game sample size. Yeah, it's just very strange. Like, you don't need to give out these extensions.
Why did you
now?
extend Vakanainen now? He's an RFA. You could have waited till the summer. You could have auditioned more guys between now.
These are just strange. Like, again, if you want to argue that Vakanainen is a perfect 7th defenseman, sure, that's one thing. Like, I'm not here to argue that. In a pinch, if you need a body that could potentially fill in and not look miserable, like, I'd rather have him than Ben Harper. Yeah. Sure, like, that's fine. But no one can convince me that Vakanainen is a capable top 6 defenseman in the NHL. Watch it just, again, even if you want to forget about all the advanced analytics and, the charts and all of that, just watch him play, and you will quickly discover he's too slow. He loses his man in front of the net a lot of the times, and he doesn't have any offensive IQ either. So why is he playing in favor of Calvin DeHaan or somebody else? That doesn't make any sense to me. Again, just watching him play, forgetting about everything, all of the other evidence, just watch. He's not there, and he's not going to be.
Okay, so speaking of this, and you made the point I was getting to, and I'm glad you brought me here. So since Chris Drury took over the team in the spring of 2021, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, he's brought in 11 defensemen. We're not counting guys that were drafted, and it's ambiguous as to whether or not you want to call them a Gorton guy or a Drury guy. The 11 guys he's brought in: Patrick Nemeth, Justin Braun, Jared Tenorti, Ben Harper, Nico Mikkola, Eric Gustafsson, Chad Ruedel, Connor Mackey, Vakanainen, DeHaan, Soucy. Of those guys, the only ones who have positive goal differentials: Ben Harper, 22-21, Mikkola, 20.
I was not expecting that.
I wasn't either, but if I remember correctly, they had a crazy save percentage in the Ben Harper minutes. That was like 915, something like that. Mikkola, 24-23, Gustafsson, 46-44, and then DeHaan, 4-0. Every other player is negative. And the only one of those guys who had a significant role in their time with the team was Gustafsson, because he got a lot of those minutes at the start of the season last year when Fox was out. So it's not a coincidence that he has 46 goals for, 44 goals against, when all these other guys are significantly lower than that. But again, it speaks to the question of, do the Rangers understand what makes a good NHL defenseman? Because a lot of these guys fit a similar archetype. Soucy, Harper, Mikkola, Nemeth, all of those guys fit the big shot blocking penalty kill defenseman. And that archetype isn't exactly the most functional thing in the world anymore because of the way the NHL is changing. You don't necessarily need to be big and strong. Yes, that helps, but you can get away with good positioning and good skating. And when you look at the guys who are successful with that kind of skill set, they're generally pretty good skaters. The more high-end defensive defensemen in today's league, like a Jacob Slavin, they're great skaters. They're great positionally. They keep everything in front of them. Whereas you think about Soucy and Borgen, and you go back to years past like Ben Harper and Patrick Nemeth, and not only are those guys kind of slow, they also don't really fit what the Rangers want to do. The Rangers are purportedly would like to be a rush-based offense that gets the puck out quickly, and none of those guys handle the puck particularly well. And there's so many tangents to go off of this, but you look at who the Drury's brought in to try and fix the defense, and this is the best you got. these are the free agents you've gone out there and acquired. These are the guys you've targeted in trades. And it just feels like
Yeah.
they don't have a coherent plan. And it gets back to something we talk about all the time. They get players without thinking about the fit. We were talking about Parson, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that as we go along here. But it just feels like they're throwing guys at the wall and hoping something works.
The ultimate question that I would love to ask Chris Drury is, okay, well, your style of play is based around the idea of quick transition, of the other team is going to make a mistake or they're going to dump it in and change, and now it's up to you, your defenseman, to make that quick outlet pass and counterattack the other way. That is, in essence, a lot of what the Rangers offense is trying to do. Why then did you bring in multiple players that can't make that pass? Vakanainen can't do it. Susi can't do it. Like these guys, Borgen can't do it. A lot of these guys that you brought in to fill out that blue line are incapable of making that first pass. On top of that, defensively, they're not all that great.
No.
So why are they here? If your two primary objectives as a defenseman for the Rangers specifically is one, to be a defenseman, but two, to create counter offense, why did you bring in multiple players that you gave extensions to also
Who can't handle the puck?
that can't handle the puck and also can't defend?
Like
Why are they here?
we've been talking about this with Braden Schneider for 3 years. He skates well and he's a big body. He's a terrible puck handler.
Yeah.
He can't move the puck where it needs to go. He is always off the glass and out because he doesn't have a good first pass. And again, if we're going to apply the same consistency that we do when we talk about Keandre Miller, as far as he's probably plateaued in his development, Schneider hasn't gotten that much better either
No.
in the 3.5, 4 years now that he's been in the NHL. Sure, he's been thrown a lot of minutes. He hasn't had great partners. He hasn't improved. His puck skills aren't better. Sure, he loves a good overlap in the offensive zone, and he'll fill in for a forward off the rush. He'll occasionally chip in a goal like he did
Nice shot.
yesterday.
That's a really nice shot by him last night. I can't,
But
top shelf.
consistently, he's losing pucks in his own end. I watching this team on a nightly basis has become a chore, and not even the really slow degradation, but the degradation of the defense in less than a calendar year. Of last year, they were able to get by. A lot of it was because they were able to outscore their issues, but now, being that they don't score enough, their defense looks atrocious. Their defense being atrocious is having a real trickle-down effect to the goaltending, where Shesterkin's having his worst season as a pro. And again, the Rangers concede, I think, the second highest rate of high-danger chances per game in the entire NHL. There's not a goalie in the league who would be successful behind this defense. Sure, could Shesterkin make one extra save here and there, and that would help? Yeah. But there also needs to be an equitable distribution of responsibility here. Yeah, Shesterkin's the highest paid goalie in the league. God himself would have a hard time in net behind this defense.
That's the thing. You take a look around the league and you go, okay, if Shesterkin is one of the best goalies in the league, right? But teams like Washington are doing really well. Yeah, I don't want to give anything, away, take anything away from like Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren and those guys. They're not better than Shesterkin. One of the many reasons, again, I don't want to, be over, I don't want to overgeneralize and do all that, but one of the biggest reasons that those goalies have the numbers that they do, on top of them just playing well, is that the team structure in front of them is designed to limit high danger scoring chances against, which, by the way, should be the ideal for every team in every hockey league ever. The goal is to limit chances for the other team, right? The goal is to make sure that your goalie doesn't have to make 9 incredible saves a game in order for you to just win the hockey game. Like that's the whole idea. The Caps have really bought into that system. You watch them play, and it's one of those situations where the Caps players in front of their goalie prevent as much of the acrobatic and unbelievable saves that the Rangers make Shesterkin do all the time as possible. Their goal this requires a lot of buy-in from your players, but Spencer Carberry is very much quickly proving to be one of the best up-and-coming coaches in the NHL. His system and his players have bought into it requires everybody in front of their goalie to prevent any kind of, you know, cross-ice pass or, you know, what, oh, this guy's out in front of the net. Wait. Whose assignment are you? Where's your guy? Oh wait, no, that's my guy over there. Okay, I got to make sure that I have him because, like, you know, if there's a switch play or whatever, everybody's on the same page always. And that's one of the biggest reasons why Washington is doing so successful. Yeah, their goalies are playing well, and I'm not taking anything away from them again, but Shesterkin is better than both of those guys. The reason why his numbers aren't as good as theirs is because the team structure in front of him collapses almost on a nightly basis. Whereas in Washington, that doesn't happen, which is why you're seeing the capital surging, despite, again, if you want to argue, Rangers are better on paper. Okay, but the Caps are playing better, so it doesn't matter.
So while you were talking, I went and looked it up. The Rangers give up the second highest rate of high danger chances in the entire NHL. Only team worse than them defensively is Anaheim. Jacob Trouba says hello.
No.
The team right behind the Rangers, San Jose, then Chicago, then Montreal. Those are not playoff teams. It's really that straightforward. Yeah, you got JT Miller. That's great. JT Miller does not play defense. JT Miller is not.
He does, but he's not a defenseman.
Yeah, that's the kind of that, and that's why it's so misdirecting, and that's why it's so frustrating. Because, yeah, were the Rangers a little bit of fun over the last few weeks? Were they less miserable? Yeah, but you got a sobering dose of reality. And talking about it in the context of the trade deadline, nobody did anything particularly crazy. Colorado, I think, had a nice deadline. I think they really elongated their lineup, got a little more specialized as far as playoff skill sets. Florida getting Marchand is nice for them. They still need Matthew Tkachuk to come back. But you think about where some of these teams that the Rangers are going to be in direct competition with for the next several seasons are in terms of their core and where they're going. Washington, I'm very curious to see how well their success this year translates going forward. It's a lot of guys having career years,
Yeah.
a lot of guys in their late 20s and early 30s having really good years. So Washington, if you want to be skeptical about, sure. Carolina, Stankoven is the most Carolina Hurricanes profiled player who didn't play for them before the weekend. He's not as nearly as high end as somebody like Rantanen, but he's going to have a nice career for them. They got draft picks, which I'm sure they're not going to use all of them, and they're going to try and turn those into futures. But you always feel decent Rangers versus Carolina. Toronto, the Mitch Marner thing, we'll figure that out. Boston is dead. The Devils, I am starting to become a bit more bearish because I think Tom Fitzgerald's reluctance to kind of make something decisive happen. But you rattle these off one by one. And we're just talking about the East, not even including the West. And it's hard to see how a Rangers team that is built around a bunch of guys in their early to mid 30s and Shesterkin and Adam Fox is going to hang with a Florida, a Tampa Bay, a Carolina even, or New Jersey even going forward. And that's not to say, what about Columbus and Ottawa and Montreal coming out of the abyss? You know, nobody expected Columbus to be competitive this year. Ditto Montreal, ditto Ottawa, ditto Detroit to some extent. And how are the Rangers not only going to get better, but also keep up with the teams around them that are getting better? And that's really where you start to get into this existential problem.
What is the Rangers' plan? Like, that's the ultimate kind of question that, you know, we've been asking for the past 38 or so minutes, but also the past multiple years of us doing the show. What is the plan for this roster, especially given how this year went? You know, if you're Chris Drury, you made a bunch of moves. You were active. No, you know, no one could say Chris Drury wasn't an active GM when it comes to trades. I mean, he's been, you know, at the forefront of a lot of these trades, even, you know, allegedly, and then, you know, not trading for JJ Peterka. Like, my man was involved in trades he wasn't even involved in. Like, the Rangers were always involved in things, but the trades that were made didn't really result in wins.
Nope.
So if Chris Drury is making a whole bunch of tinkering and a whole bunch of changes, and the Rangers are still this mid, what is the plan? What Does Chris Drury, like, let's just say, for example, that Chris Drury has immunity, stays on for another year, and has complete control over the roster. Let's just pretend that that's the case for a second. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know, but let's just say that it is. What does he want to do? Because you gave Borgen that massive extension for no reason. You gave Vakanainen an extension for no reason. The forwards are kind of set. Unless Zibanejad waves, or unless you trade Kreider, or unless you trade Trocheck, like unless you give up one of these big, maybe you trade Lafreniere. I don't know what Chris Drury is thinking, but unless you make a really earth-shattering move, trades along the margin, which is for the most part what the Rangers have done, except for the JT Miller trade, aren't going to get it done when the margin is behind the playoff line. If you are outside of a playoff spot, which Rangers are currently are, and everybody else in front of them have games in hand. Rangers have played 64 games, and Ottawa and Columbus have all played fewer games than the Rangers, and they are in front of the Rangers in terms of points. The Rangers are sitting behind the playoff line. Trades and moves along your margins in this situation are going to change nothing. So why are you doing them? What is the purpose? What is the plan for your team moving forward? If Chris Drury right now is fighting for his job, let's just say that Chris Drury is actively fighting tooth and nail to save his job, and I guess to a certain extent Laviolette's, then what do these moves accomplish? What if you're Chris Drury, you're taking a look at everything you've done, you turn to yourself and go, okay, well, I made all these trades, and the Rangers blew a 3-1 lead against Ottawa, got embarrassed at home by Columbus on the next day. What did the changes that I make do? And I don't have an answer to that.
And what's a great part of this is that they've consistently sold low on pretty much everything that they've had. Like, if you want to say they sold reasonably on Hedl just to get out of the injury concerns, sure. I guess Trouba was technically selling low, even though he didn't have a ton of value outright. But you're going to go into the summer, and
I would argue he had a ton of value only because Anaheim said, we'll take on his full contract. Like that. I don't know why Anaheim did that again, but that's...
Okay, then I guess we say they didn't sell low on Trouba.
Sure.
But consistently, when the Rangers bring guys in, they get worse. And when they go to other places, they get better. I don't hear a lot of complaining about Nico Mikkola in Florida right now. And his goals for and against in Florida aren't insane. It's only like +6 or 7 for the last 2 years, but that's a lot more functional than some of the guys the Rangers have rotated in over the last handful of years. And if you're going to try and retool more on the fly, what are you getting for Mika Zibanejad that's going to help you win right away? What are you getting for Chris Kreider that's going to help you win right away? You're not getting anything great for those guys, because in Zibanejad's case, that contract stinks. And if more likely than not, you may have to retain some of that going forward, or add things onto it as a sweetener to entice someone to take it because it is such a bad contract. What are you getting for Chris Kreider, who's got 2 years left on his deal, coming off of the worst season of his career as a professional? I know there's growing conjecture, I should say, about trading Panarin in the last year of his deal. Okay, sure. What are you getting in return that's going to fill in 80 points? You're not getting anything for Panarin to fill in that type of point production. And that's even if you can get him to agree to waive his no move clause, which he has as well. So really quickly.
Really, by the way, what I tweeted this out when it happened. Why does Carson Soucy have a no trade clause? Or a no move clause, or whatever he had? Why?
I do not.
Why do GMs give these, like, again, if Panarin gets one, that makes a lot of sense. Why does Carson Soucy have a no trade clause? Like, bro, GMs have got to stop doing this.
You wouldn't rather give him like the extra $1 million against the cap rather than the no move clause and make your life more difficult? And that's really the trade-off. It was the same thing. And that's why the Barclay Goodrow contract is especially funny, because not only was it like $2 million more than he was worth, it also had no move protection, which was crazy. Like, the whole point of overpaying someone is to not give them no trade protection. But enough about misgotten mistakes of the past. The problem here, fundamentally, is the team's best building blocks going forward, Shesterkin and Fox, 27-28. That's fine. The problem is the rest of the team. Like, if you want to say Lafreniere down year and you think he'll be better next year, okay, sure.
Sure.
Lafreniere at best is like the sixth best forward on a cup winner. And JT
Which is,
Miller,
by the way, for a first overall pick, not great.
not great, no, but because we had to see what Colin Blackwell was and what
Right.
Barclay Goodrow were and Jimmy Vesey was, we couldn't play Lafreniere in the top six until we absolutely had to last year. And again, you eventually have to pay the piper. And the Rangers had a nice run here over the last 3 years. They very well could be competitive again as soon as next year, but it's hard for me to see a world where you're going to get good returns for Kreider, for Zibanejad, for Panarin, even for Keandre Miller, and that's or Lafreniere, and that's meaningfully going to close the gap between you and the rest of your division and the rest of the conference. Because if you're telling me, well, we got JT Miller because we're going to be competitive the next few seasons, are you though? Like, are you though? Because you're not on Florida's level. We've long since established that. Tampa Bay has prolonged the shelf life of their core another season because they're supplementary guys. Like Brandon Hagel's got the second most even strength goals in the entire NHL. And that's Brandon Hagel. That's before we get to Kucherov and Point and
Right.
Sorelli and Gensel and Ryan McDonough and Victor Hedman and Andre Vasilevsky and Yanni Gord and Oliver Bjorkstrand. And those are just two teams. And then you have the lingering, if Carolina in the regular season, you've got the Devils still hanging around. And then you got teams who might get better around you, like Washington. Look how quick Washington got better. It took them one offseason. They brought in two new defensemen, they brought in one new forward, and they let their young guys cook. It can be that easy. The Rangers don't have a Protoss sitting in the AHL right now, ready to jump in and be close to a point per game player. It's really daunting, and nothing about Chris Drury's leadership style, the players he's prioritized, leads me to believe he has the idea to go out and execute to make the team meaningfully better in such a short period of time.
And one of the worrying concerns too is, Brett Berard has looked good.
Yeah,
Like
he's a solid
I
piece.
like Brett Berard. I like his speed. I like his hockey IQ. I think he's got a really good offensive side to him that is only going to see more light. As he gets more comfortable in the NHL. Brendan Othman's kind of just been the guy.
Yeah,
I have not been impressed with Hoffman much at all. Like, he hasn't been anything egregiously bad. He also just hasn't done anything that makes me go, oh, like, okay, like, wait, like this, like, he's got this in his arsenal. And, I understand there's one, is a small sample size, and two, he doesn't get a whole lot of ice time. And neither does Berard though, and Berard has showed, like, man, like he's not only is he a speedster, but like he has got a nose for the net. I mean, he's got a nice shot. With Othman, it's like, okay, he was a first round pick if I'm not mistaken, and
correct.
and
The
his
first Drury first round pick.
and I'm looking at him play, especially recently, and I'm like, I just don't
I mean,
know
he
like
was
what he's
drafted
gonna do.
4 years ago this June, and he's played what 10 NHL games.
Right.
At a certain point, you are what you are, and this brings me to the last thing I wanted to touch on. And okay, so let's say you still believe. Let's say you think this is just a down year and aberration, and they're going to find a way to transition the team to a next wave of guys. Beyond Fox, Shesterkin, Keandre Miller, and then the bottom six guys we've talked about, like Berard, Othman, Mabry, Gabriel, Perreault. None of these guys, like even Perreault, if you drop him in this team the first week of April, he gets 2 regular season games, whatever. You know he's not getting in your top 6 in October. You know he's not playing over any of the forwards or wings you have under commitment.
Right.
And if you're a playoff team, if you're a Stanley Cup contender, you don't play a rookie on your first or second line. That's not something Stanley Cup contenders do. So you really start to see how fugazi this purported, we're going to be better next year, we're going to retool the roster. There's no great players out there. Like, even if you want to sell me on, well, they're going to get 30-year-old Jack Eichel a year and a half from now, and that's why we traded for Pat Brisson's son.
Sure.
Maybe. Okay, that's
I
one
like
guy.
to see it first.
Yeah, I would like to have Jack Eichel on the team before
Right.
you start penning him into the lineup next to JT Miller and Gabriel Perreault and
Yeah.
Brennan Othman.
If Eichel is here, then I'm very willing to have that conversation. But he's not, and I understand. Rangers fans especially give their implications of, oh, we traded for this guy's son. Surely that means his dad's agent's best player is gonna come here. Like, hold on a second. Let's, don't pull a muscle with that kind of stretch. Like, we gotta relax first. What I would love for that to happen, but like, there's no implication that will happen. I understand trading for that guy's son, and that's great and all. It's, he could be a functional AHL player, but let's cool it before, like, because his son is not getting NHL time.
No.
So why would Pat Brisson all of a sudden be like, "Hey, oh my God, they traded for my son. Oh, hey, Jack. Hey, I have a great team that really wants you next season. Oh, like New York would love that. Like, this is a little silly. Like, let's calm it down a little bit."
The funnier part of that is when the Rangers end up doing the Trevor Zegras thing 3 years after Trevor Zegras was last enticing. I know we talked about that a few weeks ago, made the Enron joke that if Enron could come back, Trevor Zegras could come back. But that's one of the other Brisson guys. The Hughes brothers come to mind as well as Pat Brisson guys. There are a lot of
Right.
players
Like,
under his umbrella.
Tired. Jack Eichel's coming to New York because they traded for Brisson's son. Wired. The Rangers are getting Trevor Zegras because he's one of Brisson's clients. Like, this is, we can spin zone in so many different ways about the Rangers trading for that guy, but he's not an NHL player. He's not going to be. He was a throw it into a trade, and I don't know how that moves the needle in any direction for any situation.
It would be nice if nepotism actually worked out for the Rangers. Like, they brought in Jake Leschyshyn because his dad played with Chris Drury 20 years ago on the Avalanche, and Jake Leschyshyn is one of the hockey players of all time. They drafted Drew Fortescue because his son played with Chris Drury's son a couple of years ago. Well, we'll see if Drew Fortescue ever actually becomes an NHL player. I would be very surprised if he doesn't just end up going the Matthew Robertson way of, wow, he never got a look, so he probably wasn't that good to begin with amongst guys. And that's really one of the things, man. You look around at the missed opportunities and, well, if they had just traded for Jake Gensel, or if they had just traded for Jacob Chikrin, or you missed your shot, you missed your boat. And we've talked about it a ton. The idea that you're not guaranteed to get back. You are not guaranteed to get back. It might be a long while before the Rangers are a serious Stanley Cup contender again. And if they keep doing these half measures and getting these high floor, low ceiling guys, it's only going to continue to chip away at that. I don't think the Rangers are due for like a Bruins-esque downfall where it just totally falls out from under them. It's not that hard to do, though.
No.
1-2 bad free agencies like the Bruins have had, and really quickly you're looking at, oh, damn, Elias Lindholm has 40 points on the whole season, and that's our first line center. I don't think Mika Zibanejad's going to have that dramatic of a fall off. It's still only going to be like a 55-point forward. Trocheck's only going to be a 45, 50-point forward. And yeah, JT Miller and Panarin, but they're both old. This entire project of vision is extremely tenuous, and it's not really confidence inspiring. The whole point of being bad for 3 years, the way they were from 17 through 20, was that you would have a core of young guys that you could build out around. And instead, they built the team around Panarin, Trocheck, and Jacob Trouba. And because of that, they are dealing with the repercussions of that. You have stunningly little to show for a multi-year rebuild. What do you have? A third pair right-handed defenseman in Braden Schneider, a tweener top 4 defenseman in Keandre Miller, and Lafreniere. That's all you have to show for 3 years of being a god-awful hockey team. You gave up on Hedl, you gave up on Lias Andersson, you gave up on Nils Lundqvist,
and Kravtsov,
and Vitaly Kravtsov, and like none of those guys have particularly been anything special, but those are still misses. Right. Just because they weren't good and, they didn't go on to other things in other places, that's still bad on you. And I understand that was before Drury was at the helm, and they think they've drafted better over the last handful of seasons, but all of this just feels like delaying the inevitable, I think is the way I would describe it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's just, it felt like the Rangers needed to go all in. Because, again, the whole point of you posting that letter a few years ago was saying, okay, all of the old guys are gone. We're going to play a bunch of new guys and see where that goes because we need the new guys to take over as the next generation of Rangers. That's, the TLDR of a lot of what that letter was supposed to be. And then you turn around and you don't do any of that. Oh, some of the comments mentioned Will Cooley. Yeah, I mean Will Cooley's been a solid
Yeah,
player for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But like, the Rangers should have more than that given
And they
their
drafted him in 2021 or
something like that.
20, I think 20.
Something along those lines. So yeah, like it was at the tail end of that rebuild anyway, quote unquote, a rebuild anyway. Like the whole point of that letter and the whole point of the years following the letter was to essentially throw the young guys to the wolves and being like, hey, you're gonna play top 6, top 4 minutes. Like you're gonna play in all situations. We're gonna have you learn. We're gonna be bad, but that's fine. Like you're gonna learn on the fly with growing pains, and you're gonna learn how to be a top player on this team. That was the point. But then Panarin wanted to come here, and then the entire plan went out the window. Now it's Colin Blackwell's playing over Lafreniere and Barclay Goodrow and Jimmy Vesey and all these guys that are playing above prospects that should be playing and all these things. It's like, what was the point of you being ass? The whole point of you being ass was to play the young guys. And then when the young guys are here to play, you don't play them and you're playing worse players above them because of reasons. What was the point? What is the goal? And we're right back to where we started because the plan that you had in place the first time around, you threw out the window.
And
What is the plan here? What is the goal?
And that gets back to what you asked 20 minutes ago. What's the plan here? And I said it back in December, and I had someone very snarkily say, this team was in the conference finals last year. Why are you being so doomer? They have run from fire to fire trying to fix holes on the roster instead of getting out ahead of these mistakes and these problems. And it's why they are where they are right now. If they had gotten a better defenseman than Jacob Trouba 2 years ago, they probably wouldn't have had the first month and a half of this season go off the rails the way it did. If they had found a way to get rid of Gaudreau before it really reached a unplayable. I mean, Gaudreau's the worst player in the entire NHL in expected goals for and against. That's not the reason the Rangers are bad this year. The reason the Rangers are bad is that all of the star players regressed simultaneously. The coach is out of ideas or just doesn't seem to have any more. And the GM is doing everything in his power to assemble the highest floor, lowest ceiling team possible. Will Cooley's a great player. He's fun. He's not dynamic. He's not explosive. He's not the difference between winning and losing. You need guys like Will Cooley, but if he's your first line left wing, you're a pretty low ceiling team. That's kind of the problem here. I enjoy Brett Berard. That's not a top 6 forward on a Stanley Cup winning team. And that's really the conundrum here. Where is the next impact guy? And short of Lafreniere or K'Andre Miller dramatically rebounding in next season, their last contracts before unrestricted free agency, there's not a lot of room here. That there isn't anyone in the prospect pool, like maybe Perot, but that's at least a year or two from now. Right. And by then, Panarin's not under contract, Kreider's not under contract, Zibanejad's got 3 to go, Trocheck's got 3 to go, but Trocheck and Zibanejad will be like 34 and 35 at that point. And you're not being competitive with 34 and 35-year-old first and second line center, and JT Miller will be 34 by then. It's all so tenuous, and the doors are sliding back and forth as far as what's open and what's closed, and it's really daunting right now. And I understand why a lot of people are where we're at, where it's, can we just get this season over with by now?
It's not being a doomer if you're just being realistic. Like, I understand, if you want to be a fan, go ahead and be a fan. We're fans the same way. If you choose to have the pom-poms out, that's fine. Like, go ahead and, if that's how you want to be a fan, more, all the power to you. But we here at the show are being realistic about what's going on.
Trying to win, brother.
We're trying to win as quickly as we can in the best way possible. That's it.
That's the goal. All right, that'll do it for this week's Liberty Blue. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave the show a 5-star review. Andrew and I will talk to you guys soon.